Okay, so good morning. I'm delighted to welcome you all to our webinar on reducing food waste in hotels. My name is Hebartel. I'll be your host for today's session. So food waste is a significant challenge that is faced by the food service industry. And today we are here to explore some practical strategies and creative solutions to tackle this issue head on. We have a lineup of really great experts that gave us their time to share their insight, their best practices, and success story in food waste reduction. So whether you're an executive chef, a manager, or simply just passionate about sustainability, this webinar offers valuable knowledge and actionable tips that you can implement in your own operation. A little bit about myself. I am the Education and Outreach Specialist with the Santa Clara County Food Recovery Program. The program is charged with county-wide implementation of the new SB 1383 law and the food recovery requirement on behalf of all the Santa Clara County cities. We are responsible for identifying and providing education and outreach to regulated entities, collecting and reporting, and monitoring compliance, and including conducting inspections. Before we begin, I also would love to introduce Kira Lowe, the program manager of the Santa Clara County Food Recovery Program. You can see Kira there. And then you will also get to see Kira during the presentation where she will be discussing SB 1383 requirements. So again, thank you for joining us today, and let's begin. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. Please don't hesitate to ask questions you may have. We will answer those questions at the end of the session. We will be giving tips on reducing food waste, and we would love to hear from you as well. Share with us your prevention practices or tips at your business. Please chime in with some ideas that we might or might not have covered. We would love to share some with the audience today. We have compiled many resources from industry groups, businesses across the country, and we will share those best practices with you today. But that being said, you are the expert, so please chime in with your own food waste prevention in the chat, and hopefully we'll get to share some of those at the end of this webinar. A survey will pop up when you leave this webinar. Please take a minute to fill out that short survey. We would love to hear your feedback after the webinar is completed or when you leave the webinar. This webinar will highlight some industry insights about best practices for preventing food waste. We will share tips and examples and case studies from hotels who have successfully reduced their preventive or prevent their food surplus. Also, we will provide information about the new state law passed due to the enormous amount of waste food, SB 1383, and it's a California law that aims to reduce the amount of organic waste in landfill. SB 1383 also aims to reduce emission of short-lived climate pollutants. SB 1383 SB 1383 requires all regulated businesses to cover surplus, but we wanted to cover first prevention in this webinar, and then we will discuss all the requirements for SB 1383. We are aware that you might know some of these strategies today, but hopefully you will pick up some or maybe some of the new tips today during this webinar. I'm sure you've heard the statistics that around 40% of food is wasted in the US. You can see here that consumer-facing businesses make up 40% of that wasted food, and that is $25.1 billion that US restaurants spend on food that gets thrown away. Keeping these numbers in mind, it's important to recognize that when food is wasted, so too are land, water, labor, energy, and other resources used throughout its production, processing, transportation, sorting, and preparation. Reducing food loss and waste can benefit the environment, communities, and businesses alike. Prevention is key to stopping food waste before it happens. Therefore, the Environmental Protection Agency most preferred pathway is to prevent food waste, while the least preferred option is sending food to landfill. Reducing surplus food production or eliminating it altogether is the best way to minimize the environmental impact of food operation And this approach also makes the most business sense with potential cost saving. According to an analysis done by the World Resources Institute and the Waste and Resource Action Program, for every dollar invested in food waste reduction, restaurants on average realize $8 of cost saving. So where does consumer waste happen? Consumer waste happens in two ways. Pre-consumer food waste in restaurant accounts to 4 to 10% of food purchased. Factors contributing to this waste includes overbuying, overproduction, trim waste, mishandling of ingredients, failure to repurpose some scraps, and extensive menu choices that hinder inventory management. All-you-can-eat buffet tend to have more waste than made-to-order restaurants, and frequent staff turnover can also contribute. Post-consumer food waste, which includes food discarded after reaching the consumer, and obviously this is the food that cannot be donated or repurposed, and that makes up the majority of overall food losses in some restaurant setting. Factors contributing to post-consumer food waste includes large portions and leftovers that are not taken home by the customer. In the next couple of slides, I'll provide a high-level overview of the prevention strategies we've compiled, while our speakers will delve into the specifics. For now, consider this as a checklist and feel free to take notes as we explore further in this webinar. Your business can take steps to prevent waste at various stages. We wanted to provide tips at different stages of your operation, whether in planning, handling, or during service. According to REFED, a national nonprofit working on to highlight food waste solutions across the supply chain, the most feasible practices that you can see here in front of you are menu design, portion choices, customized dishes, as well as optimized quantities, whereas the ones with the biggest profit potential are waste tracking and inventory management and production planning. And as you can see here in the slide, that communication goes hand in hand with each of these operations, and we will cover communication a little later in the slide. So starting with the first strategy or the first sector is during your planning. To optimize the planning stages in your restaurant manager, consider the following practices. Consider designing menu that allows you for flexibility in ingredients use and offer seasonal specials and portion sizes to minimize leftover, maximize opportunities to use the same ingredient in multiple dishes, plan menu items that can share ingredients or offer daily specials that incorporate the surplus ingredients that you might have, use demand forecasting software or maintain detailed internal records to track sale trends, seasonal variation, and special events. And that will be covering what we had discussed in production planning. So, but as an inventory optimization, ensuring that the restaurant has enough stock on hand to meet the demand without overstocking and creating waste is key. So the FIFO, first in, first out method, and conducting regular stock audits have shown to reduce the amount of food spoilage in your restaurant and cutting down on food waste. And this can be done by ordering the right amount of food based on demand to help you reduce that excess inventory, ordering fresh food regularly to ensure that restaurants have a fresh supply of ingredients while minimizing the waste and from overstocking, and purchasing less and reducing the stock level to help minimize waste and ensure that the ingredients are available before they expire. And this also can be done by increasing your communication with your supplier, so the supplier is aware of your strategy and preventing waste, surplus. As for handling, some tips to reduce food waste while handling the food or in back of house can be tracking the waste and keeping records. By monitoring that waste regularly and keeping detailed record, the restaurant can identify patterns and reasons for waste, and I'll elaborate on that in the next slide. Proper training of all culinary teams, can lead to more effective food preparation practices and portion control and creative use of ingredients, and therefore ultimately reducing that waste. Utilizing vegetable peel, trimming, and other scraps of food to create stock, soup, or garnishes adds a value to an ingredient that otherwise be discarded. And finishing saucing and dressing and other component of dishes just before you service ensures that the food has maintained its freshness and quality, and also allows for more flexibility in accommodating customer preferences and dietary restriction, as well as the possibility of repurposing this item at a later time. And finally, making sure that all food items are placed in proper storage areas and appropriate containers at the optimum temperature. Labeling all the perishable products with the date that they were received, the date that they expire, and the amount of serving in each container is also very helpful to reducing that surplus and reducing that spoilage that ends up throwing that food away. In some kitchens staff will use color-coded labeling systems to make sure that the back of house staff knows what category of item is in which container. So going back to tracking food waste, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So by tracking food waste, it allows you to establish a baseline, which are essential to setting goals and measuring progress, as well as observing trends in waste generation that can help you pinpoint the seasonal variation and menu item popularity. Waste tracking also helps you identify problems such as inefficiency in food preparation and inventory management, as well as making employees aware of the amount of food and the type of food waste generated that can lead to more mindful practices in your business. Measuring the amount of food that is mostly common wasted and where is the waste occurring is both a good place to start thinking about how to reduce food waste, in addition to understanding where the waste is generated from, whether it was the kitchen or a customer plate, tracking where the food ends up, whether it's going to compost or landfill, and assigning a monetary value of to the food that is wasted can highlight the financial benefits and motivate efforts to reduce that waste. During service, it is crucial to establish an open communication between back and front of house staff regarding waste and customer feedback. This allows you for a better coordination and adjustment of food preparation to match the demand. Provide multiple portion sizes can help reduce waste by allowing customers to choose the amount of food that suits their appetite. This can also lead to increased customer satisfaction. Consider providing bread and garnishes and condiments only upon request. This ensures that they're used only when needed. Share your surplus with staff. Instead of letting surplus food go to waste, consider sharing it with staff. This can be a great way to reduce waste while also fostering a sense of community within the team. Selling your surplus at a discount is another option. And then this not only reduces your food waste, but also an opportunity for you to generate some revenue. Both speakers are going to talk about buffets and banquets. However, we wanted to provide an additional checklist as a tool to reduce food waste before and during service. And some of these tips are check head counts before setup. This is crucial to ensure that you have enough food for your guests without having excessive waste. Display food horizontally. So instead of piling items like bread and pastry, arrange them horizontally so you can make the buffet look more appealing and make it easier for guests to access the food. Separate mixed items. By separating them, the guests can choose what they prefer without compromising the freshness of other ingredients that they do not wish to pick. Use dispenser jars and dishes with lids, and this will help preserve the quality of the food and prevent contamination. Reduced plate size, smaller plates can help
control portion size and reduce waste, place conscious consumption cues, and this could include signs encouraging the guest to only take what they can eat and indicating portion sizes. And use service stations. This can also help control portion size and ensure that guests do not take more than what they need. Implementing these strategies can help improve the overall buffet experience for all your guests.
I'd love to introduce Mark Ayers. Mark is the executive chef of the Westin, the Clement, and the Sheraton in Palo Alto. And he will be sharing some insight and hopefully inspire you to make some positive impact on your business. So here's Mark.
Hey, I'm Mark Ayers, executive chef here at the Sheraton, Westin, and Clement hotels in Palo Alto. And I just want to give you a couple of, I don't know, best practices, maybe is the best way to say it, that we use to help reduce the amount of waste, food waste we generate. First off, for buffets, which is the majority of our business, or a large portion of our business anyway, is banquets, and most of those are buffets. When we have any buffet food that goes out, we put it on, we plate it on the smallest possible plate, platter, bowl, chafing dish, whatever is appropriate, so that the amount of food that goes out is as least as possible. Now, the servers don't particularly like that because they have to constantly refill, but as long as, if the food doesn't go out, then we can reuse it. We also have a great outlet here. Anything we don't put on the buffet, we repurpose in our employee cafeteria. So we have there's a menu set up for the staff that rotates, but every couple of days there's a chef's choice, and we save all that banquet stuff that we have prepped but don't use, and utilize it in the we call it the bistro, but the employee cafeteria. The staff, greatly they love having a meal provided for them, and it lets the cooks be a little creative, using the extra banquet prep, and it's kind of a win-win for everybody. Another thing we used to have our biggest waste used to be pastries. Obviously, we're not a bake shop. Well, maybe that's not obvious, but we're not a bake shop. So we would buy from a local bakery all the croissants, Danish muffins, all that stuff. Then we started, as a result of the pandemic, oddly enough, we started doing our own in-house. We buy a freezer to oven product, and we really just bake off what we need. So we've instantly just cut the waste in half. Obviously, you can't buy product from the bakery if you're running short on the fly, but you can bake off more if you're running short, if you're doing it yourself. So that's been a huge help. On top of that, all those little pastries, inevitably there is pastry left over still. That stuff, we save it for a few days, and then we cut it up, and we use that as a bread pudding on our breakfast buffet in the restaurant. So, there's almost no pastry waste before. It used to be dozens and dozens of them every day. Sometimes, on the wrong day, you throw away, it's embarrassing to say, you throw away 5, 6, 7, 10 dozen on a terrible day. As you all know, you can't use them after one day. Anyway, that's been a great help. Another thing that's, I think a lot of people probably do, we try to centralize the products we use. So, chicken, for example, we have a couple types of chicken, 5 to 6 ounce, boneless, skinless, breast, that every outlet uses. So if the restaurant's running a little shy, they can take some from the banquet guys. If the bistro needs something, they can take it from the restaurant. You know, just it's the less variety of products we have, the easier it is to not have too much of any one. Another thing we do that when it comes to ordering, the sous chefs, the banquet chef, the restaurant chef, myself, we are the ones that actually do the ordering for everything. So there's we don't have a purchasing guy that always keeps the par of 10 cases of romaine on hand. Every day we go down and look in the walk-in and say, there's 3 cases of romaine. Is that enough for tomorrow? Yeah, yes, no. And then we order accordingly, and that really helps in that I think it really helps to have the guys that actually are doing the prep, or at least managing the people that are doing the prep. It really helps to have them do the ordering. They can really get a feel for how much they go through, whereas somebody that's not doing it, no fault of theirs, doesn't really know, or maybe doesn't see what it means if you have, a case of lettuce that's 1 day old, you get super high yield, but if it's 5 days old, that case of lettuce isn't nearly as good anymore. So you're losing product. It's just due to freshness, quality issues. Let's see, what else we do. And those are the big ones, really. Honestly, and here our best thing, like I indicated or hinted to a little bit, is the bistro, the employee cafeteria. That place is a great outlet. We use pretty much anything that's left that we don't have another purpose for goes down there, and our staff are grateful for it. And we lose almost nothing. Yeah, so happy to help out any way I can. That's how we save food here at the Sheraton, Westin, Clement, Palo Alto.
Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing these tips and strategies. That was really, really great. We are very thankful. Before presenting our next guest, I wanted to take a minute to discuss communication. As you can remember in the previous slide, we had communication running parallel to all of the operation in your business. Because like in any business, getting your team on board is crucial for its success. Therefore, communication is key. And some of the best practices regarding involving your team is regular check-ins to provide your team with the opportunity to ask questions, provide updates, and suggest ideas for more efficient operation. It can also help identify if any additional training or refreshment of procedure is needed. And this can be done part of team meetings or team huddles in the morning. Also, another way is engaging your team to promote their support by coordinating opportunities for your staff to volunteer with the food recovery organization you partnered with. Staff are more motivated and engaged when they see the impact that they are having. In addition to that, making it safe to talk about food waste and encouraging your staff to reach out and discuss it. Example, staff might be nervous to point out where they are seeing things wasted, so open the space for them to do so and encourage creative solutions. And finally, designate a food waste warrior or a food waste champion. That person can replicate that message and communicate with the other team members about food waste reduction in your business. In addition to team communication, consider customer communication to boost your reputation. 72% of US diners care about how restaurants handle food waste. So examples such as using posters, signage, and even coloring books for kids at restaurants to educate customers about the benefits of reducing food. Incorporate your messages on menu bills and to-go containers. This simple addition can remind customers of your effort as well as encourage them to support your sustainability initiative, as well as utilizing social media and online reviews. Share your food waste reduction effort on a social media platform and encourage customers to leave reviews mentioning your sustainability practice. This can also help spread awareness and attract like-minded customers who value sustainable businesses. Allow me to introduce our second speaker, Rue Pastor, who is the general manager of the Ameswell Hotel. Rue has a lot of innovative and creative solution and ideas for repurposing as well as reducing surplus at the hotel. So here's Rue.
My name is Rue Pastor. I'm the general manager at the Ameswell Hotel here in Mountain View. And we're excited to share some of the efforts we've made in some of our different departments to cut back on food waste and help those around us. So to jump in, I'm going to talk a little bit today about a few different areas. We're going to start in restaurant, Roger Restaurant Bar and Grill. And here we really focus on really reusing the extra portions. For example, anytime you're having steak or other ingredients, you're going to have some trimmings. And so, for example, our Wagyu trimmings, we like to reuse those to make sliders or dumpling fillings, etc. So we try and take what we normally would trim off, what isn't going out in the plate to our guests at the restaurant, and reuse those into different exciting ways. We often do a lot of making sauces with aromatics. Once we've done that, we like to turn those into powders to actually season the steaks with the bar chips. So we do that by straining. After we've used everything, strain it, then we dehydrate it, and then we blitz that into a powder. And so we do that quite a bit in our restaurant. And what that allows us to do is essentially take what was a part of the original entree, and now we've reused it, we've dehydrated it, blitzed it. Now we've created kind of a seasoning powder, and then we get to reuse that on the steaks or on the chips, which is something that we're serving to our guests, and we actually took the extra ingredients from. So it's definitely full circle. This is where you cue your Lion King soundtrack. You know, it's a full circle of life, which we're pretty excited about. The coffee grounds that we use mostly from the cafe and also the restaurant, we also like to turn those into both the soy sauce, which would be aged, and then we use the liquid from that, or a shoyu, which is a byproduct of the soy sauce. So the coffee grounds, in one example, the coffee grounds get used, and then we essentially press it and age it, and we take the liquid and we use that for the shoyu or the soy sauce. We also will mix that with the koji, and we cook that for about 6 to 8 weeks. Then it turns into a coffee shoyu, which we use on our specials. And so as we're reusing these ingredients, that's actually being employed by the chefs as they start to think about what is the special we want to run tonight, what's the special we want next week, as we get those ingredients. So sometimes the leftovers that we have actually influence some of the dishes that we're going to serve. And so we have kind of our seasonal menu, but then we'll have specials that we run on any given night. And that's going to be based on some of these things that we have extras of. We have one idea that we're thinking of. We haven't actually gotten to employ this yet. And that is a third thing to do with that, the coffee ground. Because ultimately, there still is some coffee ground waste, even after we've made the coffee, but even after we've aged it and pressed it and used it for some of the sauces, we still have the actual coffee ground. So one of the things that we're considering now is how can we use that kind of in a chef herb garden. The challenge is there's an acidity to the coffee grounds, which we have to be very careful. So if we can figure out some plants or herbs that benefit from that, that's kind of our next step. But I don't want to pretend there is a zero coffee ground waste. There is still a little bit, and we're trying to find a way to maximize that. We also have leftover tea leaves, and we like to use those both in a tiramisu and an herb salad. I would say for our restaurant, kind of our main keys to success had to do with dehydrating, making seasonal powders, and repurposing ingredients. Those are probably the two things I would take away from our restaurant efforts. We all like to talk about cocktails and drinks, and so in our bar, we do some really fun stuff. We take the bacon fat that we've used in our restaurant for other ingredients, and we will fat wash our bourbon whiskey, and that is done to impart flavor. And so that's done by, you have to kind of essentially re-liquefy the fat by heating it up, pour it into a bottle, we shake it, it's cooled overnight, and then you skim the fat off the top. But what that has done is it's infused that beverage, in this case, the whiskey, with that fat and smoky flavor that you had from the original bacon fat. Cucumbers. This is an example we had not too long ago. We ended up with way too many cucumbers. There was a mix-up in purchasing, which happens from time to time. So we had a few extra cases of cucumbers. So we jumped into action and we made a Madras cocktail. So the bartenders were essentially blending the cucumbers, and then we added tequila, mezcal, and syrup to make a new cocktail and not have waste. And then, of course, we ran that as a cocktail special for a few days. It happened again just before the holidays. We somehow ended up with a few too many gallons of cider. And so we also decided to turn that into a cocktail we called the Gold Rush after the 49ers. We added tequila, mint syrup to that cider and made another special. So that worked really well for us. Again, we dehydrate citrus. We're very dehydrated a lot from our hotel. We dehydrate our citrus to make the garnish for the drinks, and also to dehydrate and strain and use them as bitters. So there's a few different ways to kind of reuse ingredients for the cocktails. There's also something that we're experimenting with here again. We haven't quite had a chance to see it come to fruition. We want to infuse the cocktails with liquid from making the candy pepitas, which are pumpkin seeds. So we already make these pepitas, these candied pumpkin seeds for other dishes. And what we'd like to do is reuse that liquid, which we already made the liquid in-house, but now it's not being reused. We want to find a way to take that liquid and use it in a cocktail. So we haven't come up with the right drink yet, but we are absolutely working. Next, we're going to step over to our cafe. This is where we utilize, or used to utilize, an amazing program called Too Good to Go. The point of this program, it's a website you can go onto, you can sign up for. It allows you to take leftover foods and essentially sell them, obviously at a discounted price, and folks will come in, get those from you like a to-go order, and then the restaurant, the hotel doesn't have to waste, and guests get something at a discount. So we just used that program for pastries. And part of that was because we were finding it difficult to control the volumes of our pastries, because we were using outside vendor for many of our pastries, most especially croissants, which are so challenging to make. So we were ordering, and we had to order in certain batches from Manresa. And so we couldn't sell them to them. And so we used Too Good to Go. We always had kind of limited quantities that we were selling. And you can go on each day, you list what you have to sell and what the price is, and that's it. It's as simple as that. In this particular case, it was always successful. We always were able to sell whatever pastries that we were listing for sale. So that was an outstanding program. So it really worked wonders for us. Now, as we started the transition, we started to make more of the pastries in-house. This was certainly driven by a cost basis for us. It's just so expensive to buy these things from the outside. So as we were able to make more in-house, we were able to control more of the cost and the product that we were ordering. And so that helped us save waste as well. Now, kind of the final nail in the coffin, unfortunately, for this program for us, was that we started taking the leftover pastries and we used them for French toast on the weekends. I highly recommend taking more pastries for French toast. It's amazing. But after that, we didn't really have any leftovers per se. So we haven't been using the program in a few months, but while we were using it, it's really tremendous. And that brings us really to kind of what about food that is still left over. And this is when we take advantage of our cafeteria. We have something called family meals. Normally, these are meals that we prepare these things specifically for our staff. However, when we do have leftover ingredients, be it from the cafe, be it from the restaurant, or even from the banquets, which I'll talk about in a minute, these we take right in and we share with our employees. So we may have a family meal scheduled, but there may be some additional dishes that come out because of some leftover that we don't want to see wasted. And with the new regulations, you can't just take any old food that's been out and donate it. So we reuse that, and that really finished off most of the last leftovers. Finally, I'd like to describe what we do in our banquet department. And so this is an area that is rife for waste. So we do a number of different things to control do here. First of all, in this industry, it's pretty standard to automatically make 5 to 10% over. And what I mean by that is we will have an agreement with a client for, let's say, 100 guests are going to attend an event. Well, we're automatically going to prepare 5 to 10% over in this industry. Now, at our hotel, we focus on 5%. And that's based on kind of what they ordered and the number of people that are going to show. And so what you're going to hear kind of over and over again is really how do you control the people and how do you control the product is really important, especially in banquets. So we do find for the smaller groups, we find this is where most of the waste happens. It's harder to control this versus a larger group. And let me give you an example. If you have a 20-person group coming in for a meeting, and normally you want to limit kind of what you put out there. If you put out 15 muffins for a 20-person group, you can tell the difference. If you put out 80 muffins for a 100-person group, you can't really tell the difference. So it's harder to kind of control the waste in that sense. So with either group, we would obviously continue to replenish as needed, but you also have to make sure the presentation is strong and looks like we're not trying to take shortcuts. So it's a real balance between how you come across and also trying to save food waste. We're not trying to shortchange what they ordered from us, but we are trying to make sure that, if their staff just aren't big muffin eaters, we don't want to be sticking it out there because we can't donate it or we can't reuse it. So we have to be very careful. Portion size is also very important. And we do this kind of based on the proteins. For example, the fish is going to go out about 2 ounces, steak 2.5, etc. So we do that also based on what else is going on. How many sides? What's the popularity of those sides? And so we have to consider not just how many people, but how many different entrees and proteins and sides are going to be on a particular plate, and what's more popular. There may be, maybe green beans is something that the event planner wanted. We know green beans don't tend to sell as much, and I'm just using this example. So we might limit a little bit of that, but we may plan to have a little more something. So that's kind of how you have to think ahead in terms of like what sells well for you, what doesn't. Also the shapers that go out to the buffet tables. These are going to be also sized based on the group, right? So a smaller, medium-sized group that may be under 50 people, we're going to use those medium-sized shapers, not the really large ones. Just because then you have to fill that whole shaper, and it becomes harder to control the food product. And also how many buffet sides. You could have a single-sided buffet, or you can have a double-sided buffet, and so that's also going to determine the size of the shaper and how much food needs to go out. We will also limit how we finish our proteins. So say whatever the protein might be, we're not going to finish all of it completely. Some of it we might finish ahead of time, but then we're going to wait to the last minute on the rest of it. So you might have fish that has a certain sauce on it. We're not going to put the sauce on there because that would limit how we can reuse or donate any leftovers. We also avoid putting garnishes on plates until the last minute. That might still be kind of an ice bath until the very last moment to keep that fresh and not mixed with any of the other ingredients. Actually, out at the buffet station in front of the clients, our servers are also trying to control the food display. And what they do is they consolidate dishes rather than immediately racing back for more food and continuing to replenish the dishes. So what you'll find with banquets is they'll be kind of ebb and flow in terms of how many people are going. And so after you've got the biggest rush, you're not going to want to be constantly filling all the shapers at that point because there just isn't as many people still yet to come through. So at that point, we start to consolidate. And that way, any leftover product that we haven't used is still under the kitchen's control, still under temperature control, and can still be either used in-house or can be donated safely to one of the outside organizations that we partner with. I would say, your real key to success is going to be managing your people and your items. That's how you're going to save the biggest. So, for example, we just did a plated dinner recently, and if you can imagine, kind of a U-shaped setup in our banquet prep room. We had the final chefs at one end, and then we had a whole bunch of other employees and managers were all lined up, and each one of us had a certain task. And so all of the items were kept heated, were ready to go. We had a stack of plates, and then what would happen is the server would come in from a particular banquet table, and they knew how many chicken, how many fish, how many steak. They would make that. The chef would call out. And if I was, for example, I was on the steak side, I had my ingredient, and so the plate would get handed to me, and I would have a piece of steak on it. I would add the green beans. The next person would add the mashed potatoes. Last person is putting sauce. The next person down is putting maybe the garnish. The chef making sure it's clean, and out it goes. That server collects. From our side, they collect the chicken, they add fish, and so all the proteins, all the sides are staying heated. They're staying under temperature control until the very last possible second when it's going out. And that's a plated example. Obviously, the buffets are different, but you heard me describe earlier having control over that. So it's really about kind of lining it up, and only the last moment do you kind of mix things. Because once it mixes, once it goes out, it's done, can't be donated. And so we have to be very careful about that. And that's how we really control our waste here. So I'm happy to stick around and answer questions. I'm happy to have any of you reach out. Really appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing here. I think the efforts for Santa Clara County and California are excellent in terms of mitigating the CO2 and waste, and making sure that folks in emergency food areas are getting leftovers, and most importantly, how we can mitigate kind of the waste and what's going in the landfill. So thank you so much for including me.
Wow, thank you so much, Ru. So many great tidbits there. I hope folks were able to catch some things that they might be able to apply in your own settings. And like Ru said, we'll have a couple of minutes at the end, so feel free to throw any questions into the chat for him specifically, or for any of us. We're happy to answer questions at the end. So for the last segment of the webinar, I'm going to focus on compliance with SB 1383 edible food recovery requirements, and how to go about setting up a food donation or recovery program for any surplus food that you do have that would otherwise go to waste. So a brief overview of SB 1383, also known as California's short-lived climate pollutant reduction strategy. SB 1383 aims to reduce statewide greenhouse gas emissions, primarily methane, by reducing the amount of organic material that ends up in California's landfills. So the law sets the following goals statewide. The first two relate to reducing organic material in the landfill, so reducing that by 50% in 2020, by 75% in 2025. And then the second piece is the food recovery piece. And that goal is statewide to recover 20% of food that was previously disposed of in either compost or landfill, to instead go to people to eat. So we can go to the next slide. What does that mean for hotels? So hotels in Santa Clara County that have an on-site food facility and 200 or more rooms are required to comply with these two requirements. The first being to submit a food recovery report annually. That requirement starts in 2025 because it covers the previous calendar year, so the 2024 calendar year in the first report. And then second, to donate surplus food that would otherwise go to waste to a food recovery organization, and then to keep records of that food recovery or donation program on site. It's important to note the law doesn't have a minimum donation requirement, and you're only required to donate surplus food that would otherwise go to waste, so otherwise be thrown in the landfill or the compost. So whenever you do have surplus food that goes to waste, instead you're required to recover that food, always adhering to Cal Code, of course. So if your hotel does meet the above criteria, you should have heard from us through mailers and potentially through emails as well. If you haven't received any emails from us, please do reach out to provide a valid email address. We send a few communications in the mail, but we send more via email, particularly when it comes to reporting. We'll send reminders if you haven't submitted a report. And so it's much easier to report through that link that we send you via email. We'll provide our email in the chat. And if you can just reach out to us if you haven't received an email, that would be great. If your hotel has received communications from us and you do not meet these criteria, so you have fewer than 200 rooms, say, you will also need to reach out to us if you want, in order to be taken off the list of regulated entities. Lastly, you may have a restaurant in your hotel that has also received communications. Restaurants are also regulated under the law of a certain size, and so restaurants that have 250 or more seats or are bigger than 5,000 square feet are also regulated. So in that case, the hotel and the restaurant can coordinate. In most cases, they will, and we recommend that. But they will be both regulated as entities under the law. So how to go about setting up a food recovery or donation program. So first is finding a food recovery organization that can accept the types and amounts of food that you have to donate. We have a matching tool on our website that helps you do this, and I'll review that in a moment. It's important to package donations in shallow sanitary containers. Once you've found a food recovery organization to work with, you should discuss with them the size of container and the method that works best for you both. We do recommend using reusable containers where possible. This is obviously better for the environment and can also save you money. All donations should be labeled with the type of food and the date that food was prepared or stored. You should designate space in your freezer or fridge for donations. Ideally, the space should be labeled to avoid mixing up donations with other food. And of course, making sure your staff are aware of where donations go is important. Use your donation records to reduce your surplus. This goes back to everything that Heba was talking about and our speakers have spoken to. Donation records really are a great way to see what is being produced regularly, what you regularly have left over, and so to then cut your production back or make adjustments on the back end. And then, of course, engaging your team. Like prevention, food recovery is a team effort and works best when everyone is aware, engaged, and involved in the process. So this, on the next slide, is our food recovery matching tool. So you'll first see our website here. When you get to our website, there's a link on the side, and again, we'll put a link in the chat. If you scroll down to step number 3, which is connecting with a food recovery organization, you'll find a link to a list of food recovery organizations. This takes you to our matching tool, where we have organizations that are working in the county and currently looking for new partnerships. You can use this tool to filter by a number of different categories. Right now on the screen, they're filtering by the type of food that you have to donate. You might select prepared food. Say if you have leftover food that you didn't serve during the banquet but was prepared. There are organizations, you'll find a filtered list then of organizations that accept prepared food donations. You can filter by a number of other categories, cities served, for example, or another one that I recommend is the types of businesses or organizations that they work with. So you can select restaurant or hotel there and find organizations that explicitly work with your business type. And again, you'll get a filtered list, and you can use that list as a starting point to reach out to organizations and find a good match for your needs. And then, as I said before, it's really important to always comply with CalCode, whether food is being sold or donated. If food isn't safe or appealing enough for you to want to eat, it probably shouldn't be donated. Keep in mind, as we've talked about earlier in the webinar, this might mean changing your practices so that you're putting less food out, or food isn't sitting out for so long so that it spoils. So working to ensure that you're recovering food at a time where it's still safe and of high quality, if it would otherwise be thrown away. When it comes to liability, both federal and state regulations protect donors from civil and criminal liability, except in the case of gross negligence or intentional misconduct. Legislation passed last year, the Food Donation Improvement Act, extends these same liability protections to donations made directly to needy individuals rather than just to nonprofit organizations. So donors are additionally now protected if they donate directly to individuals in need. And lastly, keep in mind that date labels on food are most often quality and not safety labels. And so many items can be donated on or even a little after the best by or used by dates. Once you've found a food recovery organization to work with, you should talk to them about their specific policies regarding date labels. And then finally, to talk about record keeping requirements under SB 1383. Once your program is set up, it's important that you work to get the following records on site in order to be in compliance with the law. The first is a copy of a contract or written agreement with any food recovery organizations you're working with. Then you need the organization's name, address, and contact that could be included in the contract. The types of food that will be donated, this could be a list of foods that the organization you're working with accepts, or a list of the foods that you together have agreed will be donated. The frequency or schedule of donations, so this could be twice a week or as needed, but it just needs to be written down somewhere. And then finally, the quantity in pounds of food donated per month. You're required to keep that on site and up to date. All of these records can be kept digitally or physically as long as they're available on site, and we will review them during inspections. Similarly, you should be prepared to discuss your food waste prevention measures during reporting and in inspections. This is particularly important if you're doing a great job of food waste prevention, which as we are encouraging everything that was mentioned earlier in the webinar, but just so that you can explain if you don't have that much food to donate, the measures you're using to reduce the amount of surplus food you have. And then finally, submitting a food recovery report annually. As I said, that covers this current calendar year, so make sure you're keeping those records now for reporting next year. And again, if you don't have an email address on file with us, if you haven't received our emails, please reach out to make that reporting process easier. Thank you all so much for joining us. We do have some time for questions now, so please stick around. We have Rue for 5 minutes. I think he's heading out after that, and I don't think Mark was able to join us, but we'll get Rue up here if you have any questions. And also feel free to throw any prevention measures that you really liked hearing about or that weren't mentioned in the chat so that we can share them with everyone else. We'd love to hear from you. As a reminder, there will be a survey that will pop up when you leave the webinar. We made that really short, and we would really appreciate you taking just a minute to fill that out and provide some feedback. Thank you in advance for that. And then lastly, we'll be sharing out the recording. So please feel free to share it with staff, with other hotels as useful. Hi, Rue. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Hi, Ruth. Thank you again for all that amazing information. So just a quick question before I know you have to head out very soon. So we know that banquets and buffets tend to have more surplus than usually made to order. So, and we wanted to kind of get a little bit from you of how were you able to get your team on board on kind of moving that culture and moving the practices in your hotel towards more prevention and, all of these things that you had mentioned during your presentation?
Well, I think there's a couple of different avenues. One, I mean, let's be honest, most of our banquet team, and I would say this is common in most communities, the banquet teams typically work at multiple properties. Many of them have, numerous jobs. So, and a lot of them come with a great deal of experience. It's pretty rare that you're hiring a brand new banquet person and training them up, although that does happen. And so many of them already have, the training to consolidate dishes, right? If that's not happening, then that's definitely something to discuss. But many of them already kind of know that, after the biggest rush, you're already consolidating coming back, but you just want to kind of check in and make sure that's happening. You would hate for the assumption to be leading to lots of waste. But that's a pretty easy fix. That's more like kind of an SOP for kind of how you want to run your banquet department. So that one isn't particularly challenging. I would say that it really starts kind of in the kitchen, and then talking about how much we're going to send out, right? And so that's really a combination. That starts with the leadership team of your back of house and front of house. Sometimes some properties will have one director of F&B. They're the leader of all front of house and back of house. In our particular case, we have two equal leaders. We have a front of house director and then our executive chef, and they're kind of equal partners in this. So really, it's that communication together and talking about how we want to send things out, when we're going to send them out, what's the time frame for that, and once those folks kind of have an agreement of how we're going to do that, then it starts getting back to the SOPs and then retraining, and then obviously observing and correcting and supporting, encouraging, those kinds of things. But certainly you want to start with making sure that the people who are making the food are on the same page as the people who are kind of putting it out. And I would start with the leadership team, or the banquet captains, those kind of folks all, and then like I said, you want to get that banquet captain, you want to get kind of the line level buy-in. Once there's a general plan in place, you would want to just kind of willy-nilly take it out there. You would want to kind of have some structure in place that you're kind of laying out the foundation.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of people are taking notes as during the presentation and as you're speaking right now. Kira, do you have any additional questions for Ru before we let him go?
I do, but I think we're gonna let you go, Ru.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice and easy.
Yeah. Well, we wanna respect your time. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Certainly, and from this presentation or the last one with the restaurants, if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to send them along to me. I'm happy to answer through you or communicate directly with folks. I'm happy to also connect anybody with our executive chef or our front of house directors. It doesn't have to be me. I'm happy to put them in touch with the actual talent in this building.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We
Really
really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you,
Take
Ru.
care.
Bye.